In every image that you take, you have to set both the shutter speed and the aperture. If you're shooting a landscape, a portrait, or a still life, depth of field should probably be the focus of your image. So you'd want to adjust your camera's aperture first. If you're trying to freeze motion or blur motion, then you'd want to focus on setting the shutter speed of your camera first. Images like this showing movement, or like this freezing movement, or like this light painting, these are all done focusing on the shutter speed. Shutter speed is another important aspect of the exposure triangle and of getting your camera and your image to take a properly exposed photo. Shutter speed is the amount of time that the shutter is opened. The shutter is located inside of your camera body, and it's the little door that opens and closes to allow light into the camera and to capture the image. Shutter speed is measured in seconds, or in most cases, fractions of seconds. It's not in isolation from the other two elements of the exposure triangle, which means it works reciprocally with aperture and ISO. Long shutter speeds cause blurriness, while fast shutter speeds freeze motion. If I decide the focus of my image should be to blur or freeze motion, I want to focus on the shutter speed. So I'm going to set the shutter speed first and just experiment. If I want to blur motion, I would use a slow shutter speed. If I want to freeze motion, I would use a fast shutter speed. So I'm going to go to 1/2500th of a second. And now, in order to set the light meter, see it's way in the negative right now, I need to adjust my aperture so that my light meter is in the center. So I'm going to hold the AV plus or minus button, tap the button where I take the picture, you can see the indicator, and I have to scroll and get that indicator to the middle. Now the problem is my lens is as wide open as it'll go. It's an f4.5 for this camera, so it won't open any larger. So this only leaves me the option of changing the ISO. So for this one, I'm going to increase the ISO, and I think I'm going to have to do it a couple settings higher. If you're hand holding your camera, your shutter speed cannot go any slower than 1/60th. So if I wanted to take a picture hand holding my camera, I have to look to make sure when I meter the light, it's not making my camera's setting slower than 1/60th of a second. Faster than 1/60th is fine, but not slower. So right here, my picture's too bright. I'm going to turn down my ISO, which will darken it. It's all about finding that balance. Oh, that was perfect. So if I go to use a high F number and I'm making my lens a really, really tiny opening, let's go as high as it'll go. And I go to meter my light, and I look, before I take the picture, I want to look at my shutter speed. Right now it's telling me my shutter speed is 1 second. That's way too slow. All my image is going to be blurry unless I'm on a tripod. So for this one, my only other option is to lower my f-stop or to increase my ISO. Let's see. When I increase my ISO, it will speed up my camera. It's still only 1/6 of a second, so I need to make it 1/60th. So sometimes I'll just put it at 1/60th on my shutter speed here. And then if I take the picture, ooh, it's really, really dark. So I need to increase my ISO. I slowly go up, but from experience, I know I'm going to probably need to do it a couple times. Right now at 1/60th, it's a -2 still. So I'm going to increase that again. It's at a -1. Let's just take the picture and see. Actually, it looks pretty good. As soon as I go indoors, I'm going to have to increase my ISO. It's much harder to shoot indoors because of the low lighting. So in here, my shutter speed automatically has to be much slower. So if I increase my ISO, I have to meter the light again, and it should allow my shutter speed to go much faster. So indoors, in this dark area, I probably need to do a 1600 ISO in order to take a picture at 1/60th of a second, or I can hand hold the camera. In a darker area, such as this hallway, now my shutter speed is going to be even slower. I can't open my f-stop any further, so I'm going to have to increase my ISO once again. And I'm just going to go up all the way because I think I'm going to need it as high as it'll go. And right now it's saying it wants to take the picture at 1/125th of a second, or I'm sorry, 1/25th of a second, and that's going to be way too slow to handhold the camera. Everything's going to be blurry. So I'm going to put it at 1/60th because I know that's the slowest I can go with hand holding, and just take the picture. And actually it looks pretty good. So sometimes even if you're registering in the negative, it'll end up looking okay. So always test it out at 1/60th, even if it says it's a little too dark. Try it, because you can always lighten it in the computer as well. But at 6400 ISO, my camera's as light sensitive as it'll be, but it's going to be very speckly and grainy when I look at it on my computer. The other option here would be to turn on a light. I'm going to turn on the light. And that would also help speed up my shutter speed. So with the light on, I'm able to take the picture. Well, it looks really, really bright. So light will always help as well.